want to apologize to my mom. I want to apologize to Mrs. IMO's mom. This is all my fault. I'm so sorry. I insisted that we watch the Blair Witch Project. I insisted that we review the Blair Witch Project. I'm scared to close my eyes. I'm scared to open them. Now we're all gonna die.
Hello everyone and welcome back to IMO Reviews. Yes, it's spooky season and today we're discussing The Blair Witch Project. The Blair Witch Project came out in 1999 and kicked down doors like no movie before, with many an audience member truly believing that this was real found footage, with an incredible marketing campaign that only heightened those fears. The film ultimately tells the story of three film students making a documentary in the Maryland forest about the legend of the Blair Witch, but things take a turn for the worse, and the footage you see is what they captured. The Blair Witch Project will always be a legendary movie for the reaction that it got at the time that it came out. This movie absolutely horrified people and it stayed with them and scarred them for quite some time, and eventually kicking down the door for what we now call the found footage genre. I was a little bit too young for when this movie came out. I would have been 6, I think, but the only thing I can compare it to in my generation would be Paranormal Activity. The reaction that Paranormal Activity got when I saw that in the cinema on the opening night and saw many a friend from school who, as far as I'm aware, wasn't that into cinema, also standing out that night talking about it, how scared they were, is the closest I can come to what it must have been like for those people who saw the Blair Witch Project. And what's even crazier about that is I wouldn't have had that experience with Paranormal Activity if Blair Witch Project didn't exist. It really is the godfather of this genre and it deserves the credit that it gets. But in my experience, it does seem to be a movie that splits audiences straight down the middle. There are people like myself who really enjoy this for what it is, and there's another bunch who think it's just a bunch of shaky cam and nothing really going on. And if I'm being honest, there is truth in both of those arguments. Which is fair, because as much as this movie did kick down the door for other found footage movies, I do think there are better found footage movies out there than the Blair Witch Project. It has since been surpassed. I mean, without thinking too deeply about it, Wreck comes straight to mind. But that's okay. It's somewhat expected to happen when the movie's 25 years old, and even more so when it's the first of its kind to walk that path. But I must admit, I do fall into the camp of liking this movie, and I have always had a soft spot for it. A lot of my enjoyment comes down to the tone, the atmosphere, and the ambiguity of the film. The complete lack of music, the panicked breathing, the very faint, weird noises that you can hear in the distance at night. And they were very clever in the audio mixing, making some of these creepy noises really discreet and hidden, making the audience unsure of what exactly they heard or even if they heard it at all. It immediately heightens your senses and puts you on the edge of your seat, with a constant expectation of something nasty coming. And the movie does build through it very nicely. It's a very smooth hour-and-a-half runtime, and they do take their time to let you build the characters and get to know them and why they're there. You get interviews at the beginning with the residing neighbours, you get a feel of the documentary that they're putting together, with some of the lore behind the witch, which does come back around at the end. And on that note, I like how only some of the things mentioned come back around. It also just adds to the legend of the witch that this story has been heightened and blown out of proportion by the people in the neighbourhood. I think the performances are surprisingly good. They do come off quite natural. There is the odd moment, especially with hindsight, where it becomes obvious that they're actors, the moment where they fight over the map being a pretty obvious moment to me. But generally speaking, you get a pretty good feel for them and their dynamic as a group. The true horror of the Blair Witch Project is completely suggestive. It allows the audience's imagination to run away with them. There's no jump scares, there's no disgusting gory imagery that's going to scar you and haunt you for life. In fact, it's just twigs bundled together, some made into effigies, and rocks. The goriest thing you see in here is a bloodied tooth, which again plays into that suggestive horror. It all adds to that tone and atmosphere of something really nasty and sinister going on in the backdrop of this forest. And it's worked brilliantly with the paranoia of the group as they continue to walk and yet find themselves going around in circles. They don't even understand the nature of the landscape of which they find themselves in, adding more mystery and lore to the very intriguing Blair Witch. And of course, I have to discuss the ending. It's easily one of the creepiest, most chilling endings to a horror movie ever, I'd go as far as saying. I dare you to try and take your eyes off the screen. You can't. It's nerve-wracking, yet utterly gripping, and the cold, muted emptiness of its final shot really just sits with you as an audience member. It takes a minute to digest. But did I have any issues on this rewatch? The people who say it's just a lot of shaky cam and nothing happening, yeah, if you want a lot of jump scares and spooky moments in the dark, you might be disappointed. Like I said, it's mostly just twigs and rocks. And there are opportunities for something creepy to be there, and it just doesn't come, which plenty of other found footage movies in future did learn from. And of course, there is the very big stinking plot hole of how on earth they ever managed to recover this videotape footage. For today's generation, hearing this movie as this astounding 10 out of 10 horror and then diving into it, you are going to be disappointed, because times change, so does cinema, and it simply has been surpassed in its own genre. But I, for one, still have a lot of time for it. I always enjoy revisiting it. I thoroughly enjoy the sheer genius of it all. I'm going to give the Blair Witch Project an 8 out of 10. Thank you for watching this review. Please be sure to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and please do hit the comment section as well. Have you seen the Blair Witch Project? What do you think about it? Let me know in the comment section down below. And of course, if you haven't had enough of this crazy ginger, we can always click on these suggested videos right here and get yourself lost in an IMO wormhole. But if not, take care, and I look forward to seeing you on the next review.